Okay, so Kishōtenketsu, but from an alchemical standpoint. So I've done this. I kind of found this. Was reading, listening about Qi the other day. Uh, the Qi of Tai Chi and Qigong, which is sometimes called Qi or Kai or whatever. It's kind of the same word, and it's the first act of the four-act dramatic structure called Kishōtenketsu. And Ki generally was understood to be a force. I'm not an expert on this, so I'm just going to say what I understand. It's a kind of life force associated with growth, with rising energy, with birth. It's an upward energy that is harnessed as such and then lowered as such. So it has to do with above, below, kind of. You take it in, you press it down. So Ki is understood to be this rising force that is played with this way. And it is also some kind of ascension, upward energy. It's also gathering and distributing. Like these are also another one of the movements in Tai Chi, which is like you gather the force, then you distribute it. So in a sense, it has some kind of alchemical theorization in a sense. It is a transformative force. When you do these movements, these exercises for a specific amount of time, and also if you work your mind into it, supposedly you'll be able to work with the force. But this is of course debatable. It's a case specification. This is not a rigorous science. This is alchemy in one way or another. But I wanted to write something else. So it's a mind over matter way of looking at things, because somehow Tai Chi is a very movement-oriented, kind of like a dance flow with energies. So in a sense, a lot of this has to do with how you see the unseen in the world, because you're gathering what? It's just basically air, but you believe that you're gathering the energy and spreading it out. So this is so far some of the things I've learned about the Qi force, and it's something that also starts from the heart and spreads out. So I see also the spiral kind of thing. But now I want to try to relate it with the four-act structure Kishōtenketsu. So I made this diagram. So as we said, Ki is the same as Qi, Ki, from Qigong. It's just in Japanese. The other word is in Chinese. But it is the starting force, the life force. I wrote here the jabr, the thing has begun. The thing that happens without anyone kind of, like it could be with an intention that something starts, whether it is in the drama itself or also the beginning of the thing, the story, the book, whatever. It's the introduction, the first act. The second act is the show, which is the development. I've put it downward arrow because somehow I'm trying to link this four-act structure to the study of alchemy again, because alchemy has the four phases and also four elements, right? So I was trying to understand Kishōtenketsu through these two, like through an alchemical worldview again. I've come up with certain conclusions that I just feel like sharing if anyone has anything to add or as such. So the second act is show. It's a development. It's when things kind of start opening. You understand the world. Let's say we're dealing with a story. Ki is the introduction. Where are we? Who are the people? And what's going on, in a sense. Show would be the development. What are the connections with these people? What are the specifics about this place that we're in? Are there any myths, any rules of this universe or the story or these characters' world? So this is all show. Show is usually considered like the biggest act out of all of them. I'm not putting them here proportionally. 10 eventually is the twist. Okay. It's when something out of the ordinary happens, something shifts the status quo, al-waqi'ah. And I recently learned that an-na'iba, doesn't mean like female na'ib. That's why they don't call them like this, but it is kind of like this thing that happens. Al-faji'a is another word. But al-faji'a, I feel, has a lot of negative connotation, so I like to use the word waqi'a more. Okay, it's something, it's a happening. Al-waqi'a is a happening. So this is 10. So a big transformation happens here, no? Something that was is not anymore. Like, for example, a woman discovers that she's pregnant, or a larva turns into a butterfly. These were some examples from my students. But they're really good examples because the one way we can understand 10, the twist part, is through nature. Things happen in nature, things change, like it's change of season, for example. So it doesn't need to be something too dramatic, but why it's important within the structure is because it creates a contrast with everything that came before it. Okay, meaning it reverses something that was already set up and developed before somehow. Okay, so contrast, reversal, it's a flip in the thing. And it makes people understand, like it makes the viewer, the listener, the reader understand what the hell is going on. Because if you notice, the first two acts do not really depend on anything happening, okay? They rather depend on something unfolding. The final act is ketsu, which translates to harmony, in a sense, to kind of close the story and make sense of everything that happened. It either comes in the form of acceptance, it comes in the form of basically an acceptance of the situation, or a failure could be, or a success in something. It's a classical denouement, but I highlight here again the word harmony, because Kishōtenketsu is a non-conflict driven story structure that has been occulted, I must say. Because I've been working as a scriptwriter for film and TV for the past 15 years. I never heard of it. I'm not even going to say barely. In all the books that I read, the workshops that I attended, it's always like without conflict, there is no story. So we come and aim to reverse that in a way. So let's look at a deeper dive to explain these things to you at Kishōtenketsu. So we're looking at Kishōtenketsu from an alchemical light. So I'm gonna redraw this chart where we have 4 acts. This is the key. I'm gonna draw them proportionately. Show. Then I will like to draw it in red, and you'll see why. And Ketsu. So one of the ways I tried to understand Kishōtenketsu is, of course, read a bunch about it, listen to a bunch, but somehow I still needed to experiment with it myself through trying to write using it, which, by the way, is insane. Short films. I'm going to write it here. I've been working with short films like more than anything in my life, and this is the first time I find a structure that works perfectly for short films, not the hero's journey. I've tried to structure short films based on the hero's journey many times, always fails, or somehow, I don't know, doesn't work. This one seems more intuitive. Why? Because something about Kishōtenketsu mimics nature or reality, okay? Because we have a lot of 4s. Other than the numerological number 4, usually deals with material, reality. There's also the 4 elements. Okay, and thus it's the 4 phases also, or seasons. Phases, seasons. Okay, it is also the number of the 4 corners of the world, right? 4 corners. So it's a very material number, 4, and because I was getting into alchemy and all of these things, I was like, let's take an alchemical look at Kishōtenketsu to understand what the hell is going on. So, introduction, as we said, has to do with the rise, a rising force. Even the literal translation sometimes of ki is rise. I think I've checked this many times. Here we have the development. i.e. unfolding, let's say. The world unfolds, the characters unfolds. The twist, which is here, changes the status quo, الواقعة. And finally, ketsu is conclusion, result. Like, what do we end with? But it is also harmony. Okay? So, when we look at alchemy and the 4 stages of alchemy, we realize that there is some kind of parallel between these two. Because we said we have the black or the blackening. Okay, it's very important, blackening, because it's a verb, something is happening. Here we have the whitening. Okay, also a verb. 10 comes as the transformation, the reddening, which comes as a okay, and finally ketsu is the yellowing in the classical alchemy. But here where comes the debate, because I'm also going to call it the goldification. Okay, so as we've discussed in previous videos, the steps of these 4 phases, or the chronology of these 4 phases, does not have to be always the same. So Western alchemy doesn't place it in this order. For example, they place the yellowing or the elucidation or the wisdom making as the 4th step. So you go from black to white to yellow. Here's where you attain wisdom. And you end with the transformation. Okay? The conclusion is the transformation. In another video, I'm going to talk about this in relation to the hero's journey, to show how this placement of the alchemical phases does not make sense. Okay? Because somehow it's as if, like, why have this step? Isn't the whitening somehow gaining wisdom, or is the whitening just getting out of the black? You know, there's something that doesn't make sense. Islamic alchemy, however, or let's say Eastern alchemy in a broad sense, okay, because it's not just Islamic, but there was kind of the idea that gold should be the last phase, for the mere logical reason is that alchemists were trying to make any metal look like gold, right? Or transform any metal to gold. Most likely they were making things look like gold. That's why I call it the goldification. You cannot turn anything gold, but you can make it look like it. That's why we have stuff like pyrite, which is called fool's gold. That's why we have the quote, not everything that glistens is gold, because gold somehow is attractive in its color and its shine, in its looks, but it is not always gold, you know? So this is something also to keep in mind. So I think the alchemists of the East knew this very early on, that you cannot make something gold. Gold is the purest element. So the metaphor is that this is the purification of the soul. This is where you want to reach. In Sufism, this is something very big. It's called the refinement of character, or tahdhib al-akhlaq. Refinement of character. Which somehow links with this idea of harmony. No, you want to reach a point where you're like, okay, in a sense, refined, ready to face the world. There's a word that I learned this weekend called himma. I didn't learn it, but I was reading about it. In himma, people who are obsessive usually have himma. Himma means like the will to do something. We say it a lot in colloquial Lebanese also, عنده همة, he does shit, gets shit done. So that's kind of, in an alchemical sense, very spiritually, metaphysically, this is where the Sufis wanted to reach, essentially. Because the only gold and pure gold in this world is very rare, and it is God. Like, if it is gold in the material, it is God in the abstract and immaterial. Okay? So, alchemically, we have something going on here. How does it link to the Kishōtenketsu? Since we said the key is the rise, an obvious question appears, why is this blackening? Because I also have to say something, that the black and the white in alchemy are also, it's the dance of opposites. It's the yin and the yang again. You know, it's how something exists. Opposites exists inside one another on some sense, okay? So I see this as something that's constantly moving. You can have a story that starts with white, everything is okay, then goes to black in the show. Or it can be that these two acts somehow are always playing between black and white, right? And when we try to see this playing between black and white, imagine this spinning very fast. I imagine there's going to be a lot of red, you know? That's why if, like, let's try to use this line to show the tension in the story. Kishōtenketsu often can look like this, you know, until it reaches the big twist and then goes down. But why they're wavy? It's because they keep, there's always an up and down, up and down, up and down. There's always a white and then black, you know, and then twist, and then, yeah, twist happen. Then you turn, then you turn. So it's a very dynamic thing. I find this very beautiful to look at it this way because suddenly it makes stories much more dynamic, you know? They don't have to be in a specific way, which is what I feel Hero's Journey try to forces people to do, no? Yani Hero's Journey, it abbreviates it like this, you know, which is the curve of fucking capitalism, man. They want fast success and then the downfall. If you notice in Hero's Journey, it's all about like, will the hero win or lose? Here, it's not really about this. It can be, okay, but it's not really about this because somehow something in this very ancient structure mimics the world and how the world unfolds. So, and the world is constantly turning. It's a wheel, right? So this is how, in a sense, I see Kishōtenketsu as a story structure understood alchemically to make us write kind of more interesting tales. There's a lot more I can say about this. One final thing. Today, I got a video by Zena Dakkash. She's a psychologist who worked a lot on drama therapy. And she says something very interesting. She says there are 4 phases of trauma, okay? So first there's the trauma, or الصدمة, which is also a واقعة somehow. Then there's collective work somehow. She was saying like people after the trauma, there's the shock first, and then people kind of start working together to kind of like feel like it's a network. I just see the Beirut port explosion when I hear this, how people suddenly went to the streets to start working like without, like on autopilot almost. After this, she says, comes the disappointment. And usually after the disappointment comes some kind of like acceptance, okay? And what she was saying in that video specifically is like, of course, people in this country are going to be so fucked up because they reach the point, like this trauma happens, collective work, okay, pick our pieces together, and then we reach the disappointment phase, which is normal. But then there's no acceptance because another trauma happens and this keeps things in a loop. But notice, like now I notice as I say it, is it doesn't let you reach the 4th act. Well, that's why Kishōtenketsu is something that should be studied right now and used to structure more works because it gives a different view of the world. It's not 3 chapters, it's actually 4. It's always been 4. We've always known this. So this code is written in all the Gnostic texts, all the Sufi literature and poetry. It's there somehow. You know, I'm just saying Gnostic and Sufi to bring it close to home. Like Christians wrote about this, Muslims wrote about this, Hindus, Buddhists, everyone. Like this is what comes from the East. This is what I love about it. One final thing I'll say, I put this of Zena Dakkash because it reminded me of the 4 acts, but also because I also wrote them in specific. The trauma is always the red. No, I see red always as trauma, or the strike, you know, the thing that happens. It can open your story. So Kishōtenketsu flows in such a way that you can even open with the red. Here I wrote this in gold without thinking because somehow red, gold, then black, then gold again, or white, you know, or white. So it could be, it becomes then, this is so interesting, red, gold, black, and then white. Black. Which kind of reverses the order. Alchemy is so beautiful because with this also you can say day, night, sun, moon, or day, night, moon, sun, or the colors, because they link to the dawn. Because if you also look at the day, there is dawn, dusk, day, and night. It's also 4. So, but what's interesting with what Zena said is that she kind of reversed the order through looking at trauma as the main act, the key, the thing that gives rise. So she contributed somehow to further alchemical reading. This is something that is not set in stone. I am sharing my thoughts in these videos. So comment, engage, please. It helps me understand. It helps us all understand, because we should write more stories like this. Thank God.